The college football playoff is when all of our season-long questions finally get answered. Like, who deserves to get in? Who has the best resume? Why is Alabama still getting in after a loss and no conference championship game appearance? All important questions, surely. But for one of the greatest seasons ever, there wasn't a 14 playoff or a playoff system of any kind. So here's a question. What if there was a college football playoff? In 2005. So here's our bracket. The 4 playoff teams, of course, and the first 2 out. But before we get into seeding our contenders, let's have ourselves a little refresher. What does it take to get into the college football playoff? It's not as simple as be the top 4 teams in the polls, as those are likely to change. Nowadays, you'd have to win your conference championship, have a strong schedule, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to be undefeated. But unless you're in a Power 5 conference, it'll be a little hard to get noticed. Just as 2017 national champion UCF. The 2005 equivalent to them is a rising West Virginia team. So without further ado, let's unveil our first team and look at their case for the playoff. The Trojans of Southern California come into 2005 as the defending national champions after defeating Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl by a score even disrespectful by video game standards. You could practically pencil USC as number 1 on paper, and if you did it, you were insane. Quarterback Matt Leinart returns for his senior season as the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Reggie Bush was the literal best player in the country, was a Heisman finalist the year prior, and won it in 2005. But the games aren't played on paper. The season started out with an absolute thumping of Hawaii, and the train kept rolling from there. The Trojans asserted their dominance all season, finishing undefeated, which extended a win streak to 34 games, and they holding all opponents under 3 scores in half of their games. They ran away with a very surprisingly competitive Pac-10 title, which included 3 other ranked opponents, and had a close but high-scoring non-conference wins against Notre Dame and Fresno State, where Reggie Bush had his Heisman moment. So that firmly pencils in USC as our top seed. Let's find out who came up just short of that. If there was anyone to contend against USC, many thought it would be the Texas Longhorns, led by Heisman finalist and superstar quarterback Vince Young, who led them to an incredible Rose Bowl victory against Michigan. Texas was tested very early in the year as they traveled to Columbus to take on the 4th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. In a slugfest that looked like the Buckeyes were going to pull away, a missed field goal gave the ball back to Texas again.
Got a lot of time, throws in zone, cut! Touchdown, Texas!
The Longhorns would escape Columbus with a statement win and cruise their way to a 2nd consecutive Big 12 title behind the nation's best scoring offense. Did I mention Vince Young was a runner for the Heisman? So as they've been all year, Texas is number 2. Okay, so that was a little too obvious. So, who's next to make it in? The 2005 Penn State Nittany Lions were a Cinderella story by every stretch of the phrase. This season marked Joe Paterno's 40th year at the helm as one of the winningest coaches in all of college football. However, the winning has been few and far between in the last 2 years. The offense was spearheaded by senior quarterback Michael Robinson, junior halfback Tony Hunt, and a pair of dynamic freshman wide receivers in Derek Williams and Justin King. So how does Penn State start their campaign? By immediately going 6-0, including 2 wins against ranked Big Ten opponents, led by their defense, who only allowed 15.5 points a game in that stretch. It was a matchup against a hungry yet slumping Michigan team that would serve as a spoilsport for an undefeated season, as Chad Henne found Mario Manningham in the final seconds for the upset. However, Penn State's playoff dreams weren't over as they'd continue their dominance, pick up another ranked conference win, and be crowned the Big Ten champions outright. And once again, That defense, led by All-American linebacker Paul Posluszny and standout defensive lineman Tom Bahali, only gave up 16 points a game all season. So despite having a loss, albeit early, the Nittany Lions finished third in the polls and have made our bracket and will play number 2 Texas. And finally, our fourth team. There were a lot of great options for the final spot, so let's reveal who it is. Yes, that's right. Our fourth playoff spot goes to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now hear me out. Yes, this is a 2-loss Notre Dame team that lost its first game at home in overtime to a mediocre Michigan State team. No, Notre Dame does not play in a conference, so they have no shot at automatically qualifying. But look at it from the outside real quick. Notre Dame started the 2005 season unranked under first-year head coach Charlie Weis and behind the golden arm of junior quarterback Brady Quinn. They flew past number 23 Pittsburgh in week 1 and then narrowly upset third-ranked Michigan. Both games on the road, might I add. Throw in another win against number 22 Purdue, and 3 top 25 victories are a recipe for playoff consideration. You would think a loss to your arch rival and the number 1 team in the nation would end your season, but not when you win the rest of your games in dominating fashion. Heisman finalist Brady Quinn would put on a passing clinic for the ages, and 9-2 Notre Dame would be our 4th playoff team, where they would have a rematch against USC. Let's go back to October 15th real quick. While Penn State was trying to take care of Michigan in the Big House, the Irish were at home trying to upset USC and end the win streak at 27 games in this heavy top 10 matchup. It all came to a head with just a little over a minute to go in the 4th quarter. On 4th down, Matt Leinart completed a deep pass that put the Trojans well in the scoring range. Then with 25 seconds left, Leinart dives for the goal line but fumbles it at the 1-yard line, and the Irish think they've done it. But then
Leinart gonna try to sneak it ahead. He got it. Touchdown SC!
the Trojans sneak out of South Bend with a win, and with their winning streak intact, giving us one of the greatest finishes ever. There you have it, the 4 teams that get to battle it out for the coveted national championship. However, before we get to the semifinals, who didn't make it? And why? Our first team out is the Ohio State Buckeyes. This one's a little controversial as they finished 4th in the AP poll in 2005. But here's why they fall short in their resume. Ohio State is also a 2-loss team, like Notre Dame. However, their second loss came against the eventual conference champions. Yes, Ohio State lost to 2 playoff teams, but how would they fare against the mighty Trojans? The Buckeyes are on the outside looking in, and will have to settle for the Fiesta Bowl again, this time against Big East champion West Virginia. Our second team to be out is the SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs. With their upset win over number 3 LSU, crushing their playoff dreams, the Dogs vault themselves into the Sugar Bowl against ACC champion Florida State. Now that we've filled out our bracket, let's move on to why we're really here. Our first semifinal between Penn State and Texas takes place down in South Beach at the Orange Bowl. Some key plays in this one include a couple of Vince Young rushing touchdowns, as the Nittany Lion defense isn't able to handle them. After a Kevin Kelly field goal in the 4th quarter, Penn State showed some fight as a crucial interception by Alan Zamitis set up an Austin Scott touchdown. 17-10 Texas. In the final seconds, the Penn State offense goes on a drive that ends with a touchdown pass to Ethan Kilmer, and we'd go to overtime. Kevin Kelly will be called on to kick the game-winning field goal, and
Kelly from 38 for redemption for the win. Missed it again, wide left, and the game goes on.
Texas would take advantage of that and win it in overtime by a score of 20-17. We then move on to the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. for a rematch of epic proportions. And it's not even close. Hello? Heisman winner Reggie Bush rushing for 100 plus yards, and Heisman finalist Matt Leinart passing for 300 plus yards, and combining for 7 touchdowns was no match for the Irish, as USC would defeat Notre Dame by a score of 52-17. And that, of course, would set up our dream national championship, the long-awaited grand finale, a matchup between the two best teams in the nation that can only be described as the greatest college football game ever played, with only the greatest finish of all time.
4th and 5, the national championship on the line right here. He's going for the corner. He's got it. Finch Young scores.
In the final seconds, USC wasn't able to do anything on offense, and Texas would defeat the Trojans for the national championship of college football. And there you have it. I gave the greatest college football season of all time a 4-team playoff, and we still got the same outcome. I think, as we close this case, one certain thing stands out.
You can have the perfect defense call. You can force him out of the pocket, but you're not